Hello, in this video I am going to show you how to apply a texture to shapes. So I'm going to apply a crate texture to my cube that is rotating. So I've already got a crate texture here. So I've got two different textures, one's a JPEG, one's a PNG. I'm just going to show you both work. I actually quite like this one when it's applied compared to this one because this is more realistic, this is more of a cartoony, and I think this pulls it off better. But again, the code is the same once you've actually implemented it. It's a simple image change. And also the other thing is there's a bit of code that is slightly different from the cube tutorial. I'll actually mention what is different, and you can get that from the GitHub page. So first of all, we want to go to index.html, and what we actually need to do, we need a library for matrix transformations and calculations called gl-matrix, if I can spell it. And so if you go to here, glmatrix.net, and you can go on view on GitHub. And what you want, essentially, you can clone and download this, or you can just go to the releases and literally just download the source code. But there's only one file that we actually need, and it is in dist, which stands for distribution, gl-matrix.js. That's all we need. And as you can see, I've already got it right here. And all versions realistically should work. I've tested it on like a version 2. This is the latest version 3.2.1 as of creating this video. So first of all, what we need to do is actually include it. And we need it before the index.js because we'll be using its features inside of here. So gl-matrix.js. And one last thing that we need to do, and that is to load the image. To load the image, we actually want to create it in HTML, and I want to put a create image for the ID. The source is going to be the location to the image. Currently, it is literally just in the root folder, and we're going to put a width of 0, a height of 0, and that is because we do not want it to actually appear. There we go. Yeah, okay, so what we want to do now is, make sure you put the gl.matrix.js file here. If you have a different organizational structure in your project, maybe it's in the JS folder, feel free to do that, and then you'll probably just do something like JS / or whatever your structure is. Next, we need to go to the index.js file. So here is where, a few things have changed. So the main thing being, if you remember, we had the vertices and the indices. I've changed these around a little bit and I've added these UV coordinates. So the UV coordinates range between 0 and 1. That's it. It's just 0 and 1, and they allow us to select the part of the texture that we want to use. So 0, 0 will be like the bottom left. 0, 1 would be the top left. 1, 1 top right. 1, 0 will be bottom right. So, and I've also commented this so you can actually see which one they're applying to, so it's just a little easier. And I've done the same for the indices as well. So the order has been slightly changed. You can feel free to adapt it to the original order. I recommend just getting the vertices array and the indices array, and then you'll be all good to go. We don't need color, so we can actually delete this. So we're just gonna outright delete that. Next, what we want to do is actually go down and let's have a look. So we got the vertex buffer. None of that really is changing. We are also, the other thing that we need. Okay, so we don't need this color buffer anymore because we are no longer using colors. We still need the index buffer. We don't need to bind this to null anymore because we aren't using it again. We got the index buffer. So far so good. Okay, so this is something that I just recently discovered. So instead of doing our shader code like this, so let me duplicate it. So you could do it the old way, or what you can do is actually create it as an array like so. And instead, if you put dot join and you put the new line character, which is \n, as I'm sure you already know, it eliminates the need for all of these. So we don't need to have these anymore, which is really cool. So because I remember that was one issue that I was coming across, and I think others do as well. It's easy to miss a plus when you're writing a lot of code, and yeah, it's just not what you want to be doing. So okay, so we can get rid of this, and also there's a few things that need to actually change in here. So we got the attribute vec3. We want to add a precision for this. I'm gonna say the precision is a medium p float. As you can see, so much easier. We don't have to worry about the pluses there. We're still using the matrices. So instead of a attribute vec3 color, we want to attribute vec2 texture code. So you can name this whatever you want. This is just what I'm naming it. Texture code, and we want to vary in vec2. And this is I'm going to call it v texture code. V texture code, and in here what we want to say is v texture code equals texture code, and I'm actually going to put this at the start of the main just because that's how it is in the GitHub page with all the source code, so I want to make it consistent. So we're still multiplying all three matrices, and we're still using the position. So next, let's have a look at the fragment shader. So it's still, compiling it, doing all that cool stuff. So, or we also want to modify this the same way. So it's basically an array, and we're joining it up. So we're going to say dot join \n. And what we want to do now is get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, and get rid of this one as well. Make sure they're all got rid of all of them. Medium p float, that is fine. Varying vec2, and this needs to be the same name as this. So make sure, it's just easy to just copy and paste it. We also need a sampler as well for the texture. So we're going to say uniform sampler 2D and sampler. Okay, so GL frag color. So instead of a vec2, we're gonna have a texture 2D because we are using a texture now. Texture, and we're getting that from a file. And this is gonna be sampler v texture chord. Okay, so now if we scroll down, let's have a look at what we need to do next. Let's keep going. Obviously all the vertex shader stuff. So here, after the matrices, this will change a little bit. So we've got position, attribute location, shader, program position. This is gonna slightly change. So we have position, we have 3, gl.float, false, but this, instead of 5, let me sort out the spacing. This is going to be, instead of 0, it's going to be 5 asterisk float 32 array, and it's going to be the size of bytes per element. So this is basically the same. There is 5 pieces of data in each position, and so it's just like the X, Y, and Z, and then the UV, and then the next set of data. Where do we get to? Okay, so we've done that. Then we enable the buffer binding, and now what we need to do is actually do something very similar for the texture. Okay, so instead of binding this buffer, which we don't need anymore, so we have a position. We'll bind that buffer, then we do the position, the vertex attributes, then we enable the vertex attribute array, and now what we need to do is say var texture gl attrib location shader program, and this is going to be called texture chord. Remember, this is what we passed through, right? So make sure it's the same name. That is very, very important. So yeah, it's going to be called texture chord, and in here, this is going to be called texture. And so the number of elements for the attribute, which is going to be 2, then GL float, so it's the type of element, false. And next what we are going to say is 5 asterisks. So we're going to say the same thing as this. And we also, so that's the size of the individual vertex, and now we need to do the offset from the beginning of a single vertex to this attribute. And this is going to be free for the textures. Here we go, here we go. And what do we need to do next? We need to enable the vertex attribute array, which is texture. Now, what we need to do is, before we actually start using the shader program, we need to actually create the texture. So we're going to say var box texture, and this is going to equal gl dot create texture, and then we're going to bind this with gl dot bind texture, and we need to do gl dot texture underscore 2d box texture, and then we need a few text parameters. So we need to say gl dot text parameter, gl dot texture 2d, gl dot texture underscore wrap underscore s, and we're going to say clamp to edge. So this is a very typical one. So clamp underscore to edge, and we're going to duplicate these. So we have 4 of them in total. The next one is going to be wrap t, and again still clamp to edge. The next one is going to be texture underscore min underscore filter gl dot linear, and we're going to copy that, and this is going to be gl mag filter, and then we need to bind the texture. So gl dot bind texture gl dot texture 2d and no, and then we're using shader program. Obviously we still got all that good matrix code for the rotation from the cube video. If you have another method of rotation, I've seen various different methods, feel free to use whichever one that you want. Okay, so in here we still need to have the depth test, we still need to do less equals, and we still need to do all of this. Still need the viewport, still doing GL clear, we still need to set the uniform matrices, which is what we are passing through, and then we need to bind the buffer, index array buffer, index buffer. But before we actually draw, what we need to do now is gl.bind texture, gl.texture 2d box texture, and we don't need to do that. gl.active texture is gl underscore texture 0, no underscore here, semicolon, and we do the GL triangle, save it, and that should be it. We should be all good to go. Let's see how many errors we get now, if any. Okay, so we get 1 error so far. Line 121. What do we get? 121. Okay, let's have a look. So probably because I did do some changing. So precision, medium P, float. That is one thing. They do all need to have commas at the end. I forgot to mention that. So I know, like, in a way, it's not much better, but I still think it's a lot easier to put commas. You know, just in my head, I feel like it's easier to put commas than it is to put pluses. I just feel like you forget it less. Maybe that's just me. Again, maybe it's just me. Okay. Yeah, that's obviously wrong. Because it should be 179. Oh, 187. 187. GL text. I got the wrong function. It's text parameter I. I mean, like, it's so easy to make these mistakes. 192 now. Oh, yeah. GL. We're getting close. Ooh, what line was that? 289, 289, 289. Okay, so why didn't it like that? Obviously it's GL dot. Okay, so we no valid shader program in use. So GL triangle indices.lamp, GL don't sign short, GL texture 0, box texture 2D, blah blah blah. Binding the buffer. Let's just make sure we got everything in here if possible. So we're saying there's not a valid one being used. So let's have a look. So we use it here, we link it, frag, vert shader, shader program, create program. So it's still compiling it. And then we down here we have use the shader program. Yeah, I missed one line of code. It's again, like, it's easy to miss stuff. So this is text image 2D, and first of all we say gl.texture, so 2D because we're just dealing with 2D textures. Then it's an RGBA, so for alpha as well, gl.rgba, comma gl.rgba, and then gl.unsigned underscore byte, and then document.get. How did I figure out this? You need to actually get that. That create image. So this is what we're getting right here. That. So it's getting the essentially the source of that image. Okay, so it's still saying invalid operation. But again, that was, you know, a piece of code that I forgot to put there, so we do need that. Geotexture 2D, just make sure that everything else is correct. Texture, wrappers, min filter. Technically it's not color binding anymore, not that it really matters. Let's make sure it's all correct. That this will make a difference, but probably GL false and just regular false. I can leave that in there. Let's have a quick look over the the error is no valid shader program in use. So I'm trying to think, is there a problem with the shader? Okay, so what we're going to do is go to my GitHub page where I've got all the code and literally have a look. Again, you know, it's easy to make mistakes. That's one of the things I just want to iterate that mistakes happen. You just have to get over them. So I'm gonna copy over the shader code and see if that fixes it. Because if that fixes it, that means we made a mistake in the shader somewhere, and we can have a look at what that problem. Okay, so I usually do find that's usually the problem. So now, if I was to, let's say, we'll look at that amazing cube in a second. So if I'll just okay, so that's still breaking. So could it be something in the fragment shader? Okay, so one thing I'm going to try is, it wasn't that. Now what I want to do is literally, because I had both the shaders, replaced. I want to see which shader is messing it up. It would appear that it is purely this shader. Okay, so now you can put comma later, doesn't really matter because at the end anyway. Put that here. Let's have a look. Frag code, precision medium P float. So good. Variant vector V texture chord, semicolon. Uniform sampler 2D sampler. There we go. Missing a semicolon. And boom, fixed. Oh, we'll find out in a second. Yeah. Not that one. There we go. So that was it. Literally, I had that one missing line of the gl.text image 2D, and I did not put a semicolon. So yeah, there we go. There's our little cube with a texture. So let me show you what it looks like with the other texture. So, which is a JPEG. So create JPG. There we go. So we got this one now. And let's revert it back. I prefer the look of the other one. Obviously, feel free to get these textures. They have to be a square, otherwise, it just won't look right. And yeah, you can apply it to a rectangle. Obviously, the object make sure it's more rectangular than square or anything else. The principle is the same. What I want you to do as an extra task is apply a different texture to each face. And really that's it. So remember, make sure you get this code, the new indices and the new vertices array from the GitHub page. You can just get it from this tutorial and then just follow the rest of the video. And these UV are just to get the textures, and that's it. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to pop me a message, and as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next awesome greatest video.